Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Learning D&D. In the first episode, we spoke about what Dungeons and Dragons is and what to expect when you actually sit down at the table. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how to create and think up a character concept. And then in the next episode, we're actually going to put that character into a character sheet. Before we get deep into episode 2, I just want to let you know that I upload D&D content here on YouTube twice a week, so make sure to subscribe if you want to continue learning about this game. I also stream every Wednesday on YouTube, so make sure to come along if you have any questions, if you're struggling with some sort of aspect of Dungeons & Dragons. Right, so let's first talk about why coming up with a character concept is important, because I'm sure there's going to be a few of you that are confused why this is its own video and it's not been lumped in with episode 3 where we're actually going to be putting the character into a character sheet. The first reason why a character concept is important and why you should spend some time on it is that you don't know how long you're going to be playing the character for. In D&D, there are 3 types of games, which are called one-shots, adventures, and campaigns. Generally, one-shots will only last one session, maybe it will run over to a second session, but it's a very short and compact story. So most people, when they're going to play a one-shot, don't put too much effort into making the character because they know that after this one-shot, they're not going to be continuing that character's story. Whereas an adventure can take usually between 10 to 15 sessions and it's a bit of a longer story. So people put more effort into their character because they know that they're going to be playing it for quite a long time. And campaigns are the ones that can, in theory, go on forever. The story just continues to evolve and grow. I've been in a campaign that went on for 3 years, so you really want to make sure that you've got your character concept down and you understand how you're going to be playing this character before you jump into a campaign. We also spoke in episode 1 about the Dungeon Master including parts of your character's backstory in the main storyline. If you're playing in a more long-term campaign, then it's much more likely this is going to happen, so you want to make sure that you have your character concept down and you have some more information about the backstory than you would if you were playing an adventure or a one-shot. And the more information you can give the Dungeon Master about your character, the more tools they're going to have to do this. If all you tell the Dungeon Master is that your character is some sort of edgy rogue that doesn't really like people and enjoys killing, that's not really much for the Dungeon Master to work with. But if you tell the Dungeon Master that your character is a gambling addict who has borrowed a lot of money from a criminal organisation that they now can't pay back, so from time to time this criminal organisation will call on them to do jobs for them which are sometimes not very morally correct. That's a lot more information for the Dungeon Master to use in the main storyline, and throughout the campaign they can bring that in and out as they wish. And then the final reason why you want to spend some time coming up with your character concept is for your enjoyment. If you understand your character's motivations and goals, it makes it much easier for you to be able to play them, which is just a more enjoyable experience. And by spending a significant amount of time coming up with your character concept, you can make sure that it is actually a right match for you and you're not regretting your decision a couple of sessions down the line. So hopefully you understand why it is important to come up with a character concept, but before we actually get into how to do that, there's one more thing I need to let you know. Most Dungeon Masters will run what is called a Session 0, and this is a session where everyone will get together and they won't actually play the game, but they will just talk about what to expect from a game. In this session, the Dungeon Master will tell you a bit more about their world and you'll discuss with all of the other players what type of game you want to play, and you're probably also going to discuss what type of characters you want to make. The reason I bring this up is because if you go to Session 0 with a fully fleshed out character in your mind, you might get there and there might be something that throws a bit of a spanner in the works. For example, some Dungeon Masters don't allow certain races or classes in their game, so if you had in your mind that you were going to be playing a Tiefling Warlock and Tieflings aren't in this Dungeon Master's world, then you're going to be a bit sad. All the players get talking about what type of character they want to play, and someone's is very similar to you. It might just not work if there's 2 exact same characters in the party. So if you're coming up with your character concepts before Session 0, just keep in mind that things might change a bit and you might have to be a little bit more flexible about your character than you initially thought. Right, there you go. Let's talk about how to come up with the concept now and what decisions you're going to have to make to create this character. So I'm going to be talking about this book a little bit in this video, much more in the next episode when we go ahead and make the character. This is the Player's Handbook, and this is where all of the races, classes and backgrounds are kept for Dungeons & Dragons. If you don't have a copy of that and you would like to get one, there will be a link down in the description, which is an affiliate link, so if you buy through there, I get a small cut of Jeff Bezos's money, which is nice. But if you don't want to buy it, there is a free PDF version of the basic rules of Dungeons & Dragons, which will have some of the classes those races and backgrounds in it, but there'll be a lot less options. So I've already said it a few times, but to create a character you are going to have to pick a race, a class and a background. And I'm not going to go through every single option that you have in detail, but I will quickly list them out and give you just a one-liner on what they are. So let's start with the races first. So you can play a dwarf, an elf or a human, and they're all very in line with the Lord of the Rings versions of those races. Obviously you know what a human is as well, or I hope you do. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about them. Basically, dwarves are stout and they're very good at mining and they live underground a lot of the time. Elves are very regal and noble and live in the woodlands a lot of the time. And as I said, you should know what a human is. The next race you could play is a Halfling, which is very similar to a Hobbit from the Lord of the Rings world. They're small in stature, but they are very nimble and they have a bit of luck on their side. The next race you could play is a Dragonborn, which is a humanoid version of a dragon, and yes, it does have a breath weapon, so depending on the colour of the scales that you pick, you could be spitting out fire, acid, lightning, all kinds of breath weapons. And then you have your gnomes. Once again, they are small in stature, but they are highly intelligent and very good inventors. And then you have two half races to pick from, a half elf or a half orc. They are basically when a human and an elf fall in love and make a child, or a human and an orc. And then the final one is a Tiefling, and these are demonic versions of humans. Their great ancestors made a deal with a devil, and that's what formed the Tiefling race. So maybe after going through all the races, you have an idea of what type of race you want your character to be. Make sure to go and read up more about these races as well before you pick. As I said, I'm not going to go into them in this video, but there's a lot of good information out there. Now onto the classes. So the first one is a Barbarian, which is generally big and brutish, and when you get angry you can rage, which gives you some combat benefits. The next is a Bard, which can use music to cast spells. They are generally very charismatic and very good at persuading people to do what they want. And the next is a Cleric. They get their powers from a god that they worship. And then we go on to the Druid, which get their powers from nature. They can also turn into animals, which is pretty cool. Or you could be a Fighter, which is a very martially adept person who is very good at fighting. And then there's a Monk, which are very good at punching and kicking, and they have what are called key points, where you can do some pretty cool things. Next is the Paladin, which is another worshipper of a god who gets their powers from the gods, but they're more like a knight. They're usually in armor and a bit more hardy than your clerics. And then the Ranger, which are very comfortable in the wild, very good at tracking and stuff like that. There is a choice you can make where you get an animal companion when you pick a Ranger as well. And then there's a Rogue, which is your typical sneaky assassin thief kind of character. So if you're into that, you can go with that. Or you could be a Sorcerer who have innate magical powers that they might not even understand where they came from. And then there's the Warlock, who make a pact with a powerful being for powers. And this isn't like a god, it's just a very powerful being. And sometimes the pact isn't on good terms. And then finally we have the Wizard. So they have lots of spells, but they learnt their spells unlike the Sorcerer, who just has them innately. So there you go, there's a very quick overview of all the races and classes from the player's handbook. You're going to have to pick one race and one class to make your character, so I would definitely suggest go and read up about the ones that interest you from my very brief descriptions. The Dungeon Master you're playing with might also have added some extra bits of lore about certain races and classes in their world, so it's definitely worth going and talking to them when you have a rough idea of what character you want to play as well. Right, I know that was quite a lot of information I've dumped on you, so feel free to pause the video, go and read some stuff, or go back and watch it again, because now we are going to be talking about how you actually come up with the character concept. So if you're completely new to coming up with an idea for a character, there's two methods that I think are the easiest to get started. The first of which is to make an extension or an ideal of yourself, but in a fantasy world. So if you yourself are really interested in nature, it might be worth you looking into the Druid and the Ranger classes. Or if you really love learning and love books, then maybe the Wizard is the way to go for you. Or maybe you love playing American football or rugby and sports like that, and maybe the Barbarian's the best way for you to go. By thinking of it in terms of an extension of yourself, it's going to be much more easy for you to think of what the character would do in the moment as well, because you're going to just sort of be playing yourself with your own morality. You're also going to want to add some drama. I always say when people are making their characters to think of one big event in their life which really shaped or changed their life in a big way. So a classic example is that you were from a small village, and when you were really young, orcs come and raided it and they killed your parents. So then you went away and you trained and you became a fighter so that one day you could go to this orc tribe and you could take them down. So by coming up with one big event like this, it can help you to shape the rest of your character as well. And then a second method for an easy way to start if you're not comfortable making characters yet is to think about a character in media, be it in books, games, films, whatever it's in. And then use that as a basis to create a character out of for Dungeons and Dragons. I wouldn't say play the exact same character as from whatever media you've chose from, but just use that as a basis and then build upon it. And you're gonna have that as a basis so that if you have to make decisions, you can think, well, what would that character do? I also mentioned earlier that you're going to have to pick a background from the player's handbook when you're creating your character. In the background section of the book, you're going to see a list of backgrounds to pick from, but I like to do this last. So think of your character concept, come up with the idea and flesh it out a little bit, and then put a background to the character rather than making a character from the background. But if you are really struggling with inspiration, it might be worth going and looking at the backgrounds. It might just give you some food for thought to make your character. So hopefully by this point in the process you have a rough idea of what race and class you want them to be and a little bit of information about the backstory. I've put a link down below to a Google Doc that has a list of questions that can help you to really flesh out the character. Feel free to go and copy that into your own Google Drive and then just type out the answers to the questions as if your character was answering them. I find exercises like this really help you to get into the mind of your character and really understand their morals and what their goals and motivations are. So that is everything I'm going to say about coming up with a character concept. If this has helped, please do give it a like. It helps me to grow this channel. The next video, we're going to be actually putting your character concept onto paper and making a character sheet for it. So make sure to subscribe if you want to see that. And if you do want to support what I'm doing here with the channel, down in the description there are some affiliate links to certain D&D books and products. And there's also a link to a Dungeons and Dragons apparel store, so you can go and buy a shirt and I get a small cut if you do that as well. So I'd really appreciate it if you did go and check that out. Any money I make from this channel I'm going to be putting straight back into the channel rather than in my pocket to just improve production and make sure that all of my videos are getting better. Stay tuned for episode 3. Make sure to subscribe so you see when that comes out. If you're viewing this from the future, it might already be out. So go across to my channel and check it out. But until next time, happy gaming.